in a little bit. Not in very long, but we're going to learn that one. I hear somebody else coming in the door. We have a nice Zoom audience. Hello, yes?
All of a sudden we can't hear you.
How about now? Can you hear me now?
Better.
Okay, hold on. Let me see if it's on my laptop. Okay, how about now? Is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank
Good.
you.
Okay. I want to give you all a couple updates. One is on Bob. Do you remember Bob? Bob Horwitz. He's our sax and flute and everything else player. He had major heart surgery that was done a year ago, something like that, and he's been getting better from that. But he had another operation yesterday, and it went all right, but there was a little damage, I guess, that was done and that happened, and he's not. He's hurting a lot right now, so we want to remember him. He will be all right. I mean, this is not like something that's he's gonna die from, but nope, he's here. Maybe. Mark Motto is on Zoom. Wow. Isn't that nice? I will. I'm going to let you look at him in a minute. Mark, is that you?
Hola, señor. ¿Cómo está?
Hola. You don't have your video on, do you?
I got to figure out how to work up.
That's all right. Are you looking at me?
I can see you, yeah.
Okay, well, here's everybody else. So they're waving at you and everybody on Zoom right now.
Oh, yeah.
Here's people here waving at you guys, and glad that you all joined us any way that you joined us. Might be easier to get more. What is it, water? Hold on, Zoom audience. We have just 1 minute. We have something we're cleaning up here. No, is that water that fell on the floor? I think Don is going to get more towels, and we can help you wipe that up so that you don't have to bend over like that. Let us rejoice greatly in Yeshua. Bob, yes. Yes.
In the book of Acts, did they get together, the elders, and go anoint the person? Can we do that?
Yes, when he's out of the hospital, yes. Yep. We could do that. Patty, I thought that was Don that went to get the towels. No, I feel like I should be doing that. If it's tea, it'll dry, as long as it doesn't have sugar in it.
No, it has no sugar in it.
Hey, Evan. Evan, and in the booth, are you guys on yet? Are we on yet? We're live. Can you, for a minute?
Probably, yes. I'm so sorry.
Hello. I think that'll be all right, as long as nobody's, wandering around up here. Watch as long as it's not going to be sticky, it'll dry, and we don't need to worry about it. There you go. Hey, Jim.
We tuned in kind of late. Who were you talking about?
Bob Horwitz. Bob Horwitz is the man that judge. Judge means leading or governing as well. Like the judges in the book of Judges. They weren't people with robes and gavels. Well, they may have had robes, but they didn't have gavels. They didn't have a courtroom. What were they? They were like generals, right? They were leaders of Israel, okay? So here's the word in the notes, judges. The word is originally from the root shin pei tate, which is shaphat, and it means decide or judge or govern. Okay? It's related to the word mishpat, which means judgment. Okay? Now, you can look at this word and you can figure it out. Even though you don't know Hebrew, look in your notes where is written the word judges. Okay? And there are Hebrew letters there, and there are English letters right by it. S-H-O-F-T-I-M. Okay? From the root S-H-A-P-H-A-T. Okay? And then down in the bottom, the related word M-I-S-H-P-A-T. So if you were to look at that and ask, what are English letters and sounds that all three of those words have in common? So what do you have? You have sh, right? S-H. Okay? Sh. Okay, what else? Okay? T, which is at the end, all right, of those words, all right? Sh, ft. And you have a P-H or an F, which in English is f. So you have sh, f, t. That's the root word in Hebrew. Sh, f, t is the root word in Hebrew, okay? And a lot of other roots are springing off of that word, like the word judges. Judge, an individual judge, is a shofat, where more than one is shoftim, because the I-M at the end of the word means the word is plural, okay? We'll learn all that later, but I just wanted to highlight it and bring it out so that now you'd know more. You're smarter now than when you left, right? Okay, and then there's the word officer, which begins with a sh as well, shoter, and it means an officer or a foreman. So the leaders in Israel, all right, were to only lead with righteousness. That's the idea. To us, that's obvious, all right? But in our world today, that is not obvious. People are not looking for leaders with righteousness. I mean, we are, but a lot of people are looking for leaders that will do what? Give them gifts. Buy them off. Give them everything they want, regardless of righteousness. We are looking for leaders that are righteous, okay? And that's the way it was in Israel. Now, if you really want to enjoy reading Hebrew, judge the people with righteous judgment, you'll recognize some of the words. I have it written there in Hebrew, which reads right to left, but I also have what that whole sentence sounds like in Hebrew. So does anybody want to read it? Or will you want to read it all together? All of those strange-looking words? Here we go, all together. See if you can do it. Washafaitu, Eit ha'am mishpat zedek. So you recognize any words in there? Zedek. Zedek is righteous, right? Mishpat is in there. That's judgment. Okay, how about 8? 8, those two letters. That's the Aleph and the Tav in Hebrew. Okay? So you're recognizing them, which is great. What about Wa, shaphitu. Okay, there's the sh and the f and the t. Okay, so that's the word judge. When you judge. And judge. When you judge. Okay? All right, let's move on. That's enough Hebrew language because your mind's going to go get blown up. Okay, now, very interesting that these words, almost the exact words, were spoken by Yeshua according to John. Because in John's gospel, these are Yeshua's words. Do not judge by appearance, but judge righteously. Okay, now just hold on to that because I know what might be going on in your mind right here. Put it this way. Jesus commands his followers to judge righteously. And you're going to ask, well, I thought Jesus said, don't ever judge. You would be wrong. Jesus never said, don't ever judge. Okay? In John, we read that he said, when you judge, judge righteously. Okay? We're going to look at that a little bit more in a minute. Now, when those words were given by Yeshua, we need to remember where he was and what he was doing. He was in the temple. And it was during Sukkot, which is the Feast of Booths or Tabernacles, which we're going to have around here in about a month. Okay, a little bit more than a month. But we're coming right up on it. The religious leaders were angry with him because he was healing on Shabbat. And in their oral Torah, they were not allowed to do that. Okay? Not in God's Torah. In God's law, there's not a word about whether you're allowed to heal on Sabbath or not. And Yeshua said, well, aren't you allowed to do good works on Shabbat? Then why would I not be able to heal, right? Okay? But remember, the religious leaders had their own rules that had been added on to the other rules, okay? So what Yeshua was doing when he said those words, don't judge by appearance, is he was pointing the religious leaders back to what we just read in Deuteronomy about judging righteously. And he, just a few sentences earlier, his words to the religious leaders were, hasn't Moses given you the Torah, and yet none of you keeps it? Wow. Okay, that was a slam on the religious leaders who were coming after him because he, supposedly, Yeshua, broke Torah. No, he broke their Torah. He didn't break God's Torah and God's law. Okay? So, you with me? Now, very interestingly, when we read the words in Deuteronomy, okay, they're immediately after the command that we are to keep the appointed time of Sukkot. So, and that's when Yeshua said those words. Now, what inquiring minds want to know is, yes, but what about Jesus' words, judge not lest you be judged, right? And what about the idea that people have that, Christians are the most judgmental people in the world? And if I had somebody say that to me, I would ask, what do you mean by judgmental? You notice I ask about words a lot. Drives my wife nuts sometimes because I get used to doing that, and then she'll say something and I'll say, well, what do you mean by that? She'll say, you know what I mean. No, I don't. I'm asking. I don't know what you mean. Okay? So when somebody in the world makes an accusation that Christians are judgmental, what does that mean? Okay? What do you think it means? What do you think that generally means? They're trying to find fault with believers, okay? And they're trying to justify whatever they want to do. Okay, well, I'm a guy, but I want to be a girl. Well, that isn't right. Well, you're being judgmental. Okay, that's what you get, okay? And what I'm letting you all know is that form of being judgmental is what we better be doing. Okay? Now, the judgmental that is condemning is a whole nother word. Oh, another. That isn't even a word. It's another word. Okay? That is not where we are to be. We are not the judge and jury, but we are those who have been given Torah, and we are able to judge whether a behavior lines up with it or not. Right? Okay? It's simple that way. Now, listen to Yeshua's words, all of his words in the Sermon on the Mount about judging and the words that go with it, the context, all right? This is from the Tree of Life version. Stop judging so that you may not be judged. For with the judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Okay, stop right there. Measured by whom? By everybody. With the measure you use, it will be used to you. If you judge another, then you're going to be judged. Right? What you're doing when we make a judgment, what we're doing is we're setting ourselves up to be judged by those that we're making the judgment about. That has a good element and that has a bad element. There's a negative and there's a positive. The negative is if you and I are not walking in righteousness, then we have no right to judge. Or we're going to be judged, it's going to come right back at us. Yeah, but you, okay? However, if you and I are walking in righteousness, and you might say, well, gee, nobody walks in 100% righteousness. I don't mean 100%. I mean you're walking the walk, you're living your life, you're obeying, you're a believer and all that. Then you have a responsibility to make judgments. But we're going to look at what those judgments look like. Okay? So he goes on. He says, why do you look at the speck in your brother's eyes, but you don't notice the beam in your own? Ah, there's the problem. Don't judge when you have a beam in your eye. Okay? Or how will you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, and look, the beam is in your own eye? Hypocrite, first take the beam out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to be able to take the speck out of your brother's eye. Okay, let me put it in wellspring lingo. If I'm living in bitterness and I'm angry and bitter, all right, and I walk up to somebody else and I say, man, you're really angry and bitter, I'm not helping anybody. Okay? However, if I get rid of my own anger and bitterness, then I'm in a position when somebody asks, I'm just miserable. And I go, well, kind of looks like there might be some bitterness going on in your life. Is there? Okay, am I judging them while I'm making a judgment that something is going on? See how it works? Okay, so if you are able, this is one of the reasons why in programs like AA, okay, in AA, somebody who is an alcoholic and they go through, or they want to go through AA, they have to have a sponsor in the group. And that sponsor has to be sober. Somebody that doesn't drink. Okay? Because, what good is it going to do if you have somebody who's a drunk helping somebody who's another drunk? Because what they're going to help each other do is get drunk. Right? Simple. Okay. The Greek word for judge is krino, which means condemn. another. All right? The Hebrew word doesn't mean, the word that we just looked at, shafat, doesn't mean condemn. It means decide, choose. All right? Yeshua's words, judge not, address, first of all, the wrong standard of judgment, the one that the religious leaders were using, which was their own rules, okay? And secondly, it addresses the attitude of the judgment that was made, okay? So the bottom line is, if you are going to judge, you can only use God's standard to judge. Yes, Gar.
I'd like to ask a question. When we go to jury duty, isn't that what we're doing?
Sure. Yes. You're judging from the evidence, and then you're handing a verdict, and then the judge makes the, final, what's the word I'm looking for? Condemnation or whatever it is. Sentence. Yep. But you're doing that, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. You're expected to do that, but do it rightly and righteously. That's all. Right? Okay. It is common sense. You're right. Okay, now, the condemning and shaming, we are never to be involved in. Okay, that isn't right. Okay? How does that work? Well, I remember years ago, there was a Baptist church in somewhere in Texas, I think it was. And this was when all the gay marriage arguments were being debated. Okay? And they made these signs and went out and walked around the courthouse. And do you remember what was on the signs? God hates fags. And they walked around with these. Now, they weren't the Baptist branch that I am from. They were another Baptist branch. How many of you know there's 2,000 Baptist branches in America? They're all different. They're as different as a Methodist is from a Presbyterian. They're all different. That's mine. Baptist, different. They're all different. So when we lump them, oh, you're Baptist, you're like, usually when people say that, I go, you don't know what you're talking about, because you don't even know what that means, that I'm Baptist. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. That's another day. Okay? But they had these, and they were walking around. Okay? So then the media, they swoop in, of course, and they're showing all these people, and they're walking up to them, and they're like, what do you mean God hates fags? And they're like, well, righteousness, Leviticus, and yada, like that. And I look at that, and I go, people have lost their minds on both ends of this. Okay? On the one hand, if anybody were to ask me about homosexual behavior, is it right or is it wrong? My answer is, it's wrong. Well, how do you know that? Because it's in the Bible. Well, it's in the Old Testament. It's in both, Old and New. So you can't get me on that one. Okay? Well, you're being a hater. No, I don't hate you. I don't hate anybody. Okay? I hate what God hates, and what God hates is evil behavior. And all that I'm suggesting is that behavior is wrong. That's a judgment that I'm allowed to make because I have the book, where it lets me know that that behavior is wrong behavior. The other guys that are holding the signs, God hates these people, those guys are judging in an evil way, in my judgment. Okay? Because they're condemning, they're mean, and there's a hate message behind it. Okay? That doesn't need to be there. All right? And the fact that I believe and preach that a behavior is wrong doesn't mean I hate those that are engaged in that behavior. On the contrary, it means I love them. I love them enough to want to help them to get out of what's going on in their mind, which is a whole nother message for another day. But that's the bottom line. Okay? I hope that you're all right with that. I have words in here from today's word by Skip Moen, and I thought this is very interesting. He writes, Jesus is warning us not to act as judge and jury. Condemnation is ultimately in the hand of God. He knows the hearts of men. When we decide that someone else deserves God's punishment on the basis of our opinion alone, we usurp God's role as the judge of all mankind. But he goes on. Does this mean that we are never to act as judge? No. In fact, God specifically designates men to act as his regents in the execution of punishment. He appoints judges in both the social and spiritual world. But the judgment belongs to him. We are here to execute his judgment, not make up our own. So that's the idea behind the Leviticus passage and the ones in Paul's writings about homosexual behavior. I'm not here to give you my own opinion or my own judgment. I'm just here to execute God's judgment. Okay? God has provided in his word all that we need to know in order to determine the proper course of action in human relationship management. Just go read the law or Torah. The principles of proper conduct pleasing to God are all there. There is really very little guesswork. So, there you go. Judgment. So reading on in Deuteronomy, the next verse that I selected here is justice, justice you must pursue so that you may live and possess the land that Adonai your God is giving you. The word justice there is the word zedek. Well, the word zedek means something else in Hebrew. What is it? Righteousness. So you could very easily translate that verse, and some English versions do, righteousness, righteousness you must pursue so that you may live and possess the land that Adonai your God is giving you. Every Hebrew letter has an ancient picture, okay? And the picture of the word Zedek is of a man on his side, okay, and a door and a sunrise. The sunrise often means the God or eternity because it's way out there, okay? The door represents entering in to something. The man laying on his side represents humility. Okay? So the word zedek, or righteousness, in the ancient pictograph means something like humility that finds the door to nearness to God, or the door of nearness to God. Okay? The religious leaders, unfortunately, in their invention of the oral law, or the oral Torah, they took great liberties, and sometimes they changed the words of what's in Torah. I gave you an example of that. All right, when here's an example of how they changed the words and gave them a different meaning. In Exodus 23, verse 2 are the words, "You shall not follow the masses in doing evil, nor shall you testify in a dispute so as to turn aside after a multitude in order to pervert justice." In plain English, that means don't follow the crowd when they're doing wrong. Right? Okay, and don't testify against another because others are saying he's guilty. So Gar brought up, you're in a jury. Okay, you're in a jury and you're hearing the evidence. And everybody in the room, all 11 of them, except you, all 11 of them are just going, he's guilty. It's obvious, he's guilty. But you know there's not enough evidence. And in your mind, you have no idea if he's guilty or not guilty. It would be wrong and unrighteous of you to give a guilty verdict if you don't know that he's guilty. That's what this verse is about. Common wisdom, right? So what the rabbis did, the leaders, is they took that verse and they crossed out words so that the meaning they arrive at is follow the masses and turn aside after a multitude. How do you think it was that they gave the command or words or whatever? I mean, they're not the ones that put Yeshua to death, but they're the ones that led him into into the Romans, and their words and the words of the crowd, everybody was like, well, yeah, he's guilty. Execute him. Okay? How were they able to do that? They were able to do that because they believed that sometimes you've got to follow the masses. Follow the crowd. It's all right to do that when you need to do it. Okay? So they invented the idea that what God commanded them to do was side with the masses, meaning always agree with the majority. In other words, their rabbinical law told them to do the exact opposite of what Torah commanded. Wow. Okay. I'm going to bring up in a little while somebody else that was noted for doing that way back in the Tanakh that Jim and Kathy Erickson brought up to me about 20 minutes before we began this class. I learned this, and I think it's worthy of hearing, so we will in a little bit. Okay, no wonder Yeshua said that these religious leaders were making void the Word of God with their tradition that they've handed down. Okay, that's exactly what they were doing. Now, moving on in the Torah reading in Deuteronomy 17, verse 1, you read, "You are not to sacrifice to Adonai your God a bull or a sheep that has a defect or anything bad, for that would be an abomination to your God." In plain English, God deserves your best. Don't give him any less than your best. All right? In Malachi wrote about offerings that were given that were not the best and they were defiled. Okay? Do you think that God is mainly concerned with the amount that you give? No. Is that an element of his concern? Probably. Okay? But it's not the main element, is it? What is the main element? How you give, your attitude, your why, whether or not it's your best, whatever it is that you're going to give him. He wants your best. So in Malachi, God says this through the prophet: when you bring a blind one as sacrifice, is it not wrong? Meaning a blind animal. Or when you bring a lame or a sick one, is that not wrong? Offer those to your governor. Would he be pleased with you? Or will he acknowledge you favorably? Says Adonai Tzavot, the Lord of hosts. Okay, so you get it. This reminds us, and ought to remind us, of Cain and Abel. What was that all about? It wasn't about the fact, I don't believe, that Abel brought an animal and Cain brought veggies. That's not wrong. In Torah, there are offerings that are animals, and there are offerings that are veggies. The key in Cain and Abel is that Abel brought the best. And it says that in Genesis. The firstborn of his flock and their fat portions. That means the best in what was required. You might ask, how did Abel know this? When Torah wasn't given until Moses. How did Abel know what God wanted in that offering? Anybody have an answer? What? Because they learned it from Adam and Hava. Well, how did Adam and Hava know? They learned it from God. Yes. Okay? So, in other words, even in the garden there was Torah. It just wasn't written down yet that we know of. It was written down in Moses' day. It already existed. Cain and Abel knew what was right and what was wrong in bringing an offering. Noah knew what a clean and an unclean animal were, what A was. Know what clean and unclean animals were. Okay? So, here we have Cain and Abel, and it says that Adonai looked favorably on Abel's, but not on Cain's. And Cain got angry. Okay? So what was that about? Well, it was about his bitterness and his jealousy, but it was also about his unwillingness to bring the best that he had. And then he got mad. Okay? And then killed his brother. By the way, in Jewish tradition, we don't know if there are Jewish traditions that indicate that he didn't mean to murder his brother. But it was an anger. He had a rock, and he hit him with the rock, and he didn't mean for him to die, which is why when God came down and said, "This is going to be your punishment," it wasn't "now you die," because it was an accident. But that's a whole other teaching. Yes, Gar.
The law says that you hate, that's murder.
If you hated your heart, that's right. But the word hate is not used in the Cain and Abel. The word anger is. So he was angry with his brother. And I'm not suggesting what he did was right. I'm just suggesting when people ask, because they want to know, people that are going to read the Bible and dig in and then be critics are going to ask, well, wait a minute. Wasn't he supposed to be put to death if he murdered his brother? So, and the answer is yes. Okay, unless it was an accident. And then what did he have to do? What happened in Israel if you killed another human being on accident, like manslaughter? What happened?
Sanctuary.
Yes, you had to go to a sanctuary city. You had to leave your home where you were and go to somewhere else. It was a sanctuary city until the high priest died and the next one raised up, and then you were released, and then you could go home or whatever. Okay? Isn't that a little bit like what happened to Cain? Right? So think about that. Okay.
Another thing was the lady with the mite. Remember?
The widow with the mite. Yes, she gave that. And Yeshua said that lady gave more than any of you religious leaders. Because you're giving out of your abundance a little bit. She gave everything she owns. So, good. Glad you brought that up. So, if we are to give our best to God, really, what do we have to offer Him? And Paul answers that in Romans. Your bodies. You. You have you to offer. Yes, money is involved. Yes, work is involved. All of that is you. All of that represents you. And if we give our lives to Him as a living sacrifice, that is our best, then that's what He wants. Okay, moving on to Deuteronomy 17, verse 5. Then you are to bring out to your gates the man or woman who has done this evil thing, stone the man or woman and stones to death. By the word of 2 or 3 witnesses, the one who is to die is to be put to death. No one is to be put to death by the word of one witness. Okay, this is rules about capital punishment for certain crimes. And what I want you to notice is not that there is capital punishment, but notice it is never to be by the word of one witness. Okay? And if you lie as a witness, then you are now guilty of a capital crime. Which is one of the reasons why in John 8, when Yeshua was there with the woman caught in adultery, they all dropped their rocks and walked away, is He reminded them of that rule. if you're lying about this woman, then you're next. And they left. Okay? In Matthew 18, it speaks about how to deal with a brother or sister who is sinning against you. And Yeshua says, if he does not listen, take with you one or two more, so that by the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may stand. Okay? He's using that rule in Torah that has to do with having more than one witness. Okay? He does that in John's gospel as well. You might remember John 7, where all that action was going on. He said, here's who's witnessing me doing this. Okay? It's my Father in heaven. And who else? John the Baptist is my witness. So he has 2 witnesses. John the Baptist and his Father in heaven. Okay. The bottom line is that in all justice and in all righteousness, it must be fair and there must be evidence. Okay? It's too easy to make assumptions and speculation that can be used as, quote, truth. Which, by the way, is happening all around us today. If you are accused of doing something that is against the woke law, okay, there's more than one law in operation right now in the United States of America. One is the law that is on the books in the Constitution, in our books, in our local areas. The other is the woke law, which is a new law that isn't even written down, but it doesn't matter, because the people who are executing that law are going to be judge and jury. Okay? Well, whatever it is about. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether you lean to the left or you lean to the right. If the woke crowd gets a hold of you, it's not going to be fair. You can count on that. All right? There must be evidence, and the evidence must not be one individual who raised their hand and said, hey, he did this. It's got to be more. Okay? All right. In the 17th chapter, verse 12. So you are to purge the evil from Israel. Then all the people will hear and be afraid and not act presumptuously again. In the next verse, when you come to the land that Adonai your God is giving you, possess it and dwell in it, and you say, I will set a king over me like all the nations around me. Okay, so stop right there. Very interesting. In Deuteronomy, we're reading about what happens later in the chronology in Samuel. Because in the book of Samuel, Israel wanted to be like the nations around them, and they wanted a king like the nations around him. Even though Samuel warned them, he was like, no, you don't. They said, yes, we do. He said, no, you don't. Yes, we do. They had an argument. Okay? And his word, they, says in 1 Samuel 8, then all the elders of Israel gathered together, came to Samuel at Ramah, and said to him, behold, you have grown old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now, appoint for us a king to judge us, like all the nations. But the matter was displeasing in Samuel's eyes when they said, give us a king to judge us. So Samuel prayed to Adonai, and Adonai said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people and all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, they have rejected me from being king over them. So if you want a man, a human being, to be your boss, your overlord, your dictator, there will be one provided. And it has happened over and over and over again in history. Because people go, we just want help, and he'll help us. Okay? And he's going to give us money, and he'll help us. And lo and behold, a couple years later down the road, he's your boss. Right? Okay? Sorry. Rabbi Rails. So it's interesting that you read it in Deuteronomy that Yehovah knew that they would eventually ask for a king, like all the nations. So he gave them instructions in advance. Okay, and he says this in Deuteronomy 17, verse 16. Only, meaning only the king that you're going to get, should not multiply horses for himself or make the people return to Egypt to multiply horses, because Adonai has said to you, you must never go back that way again. Nor should he multiply wives for himself, so that his heart does not turn aside, nor multiply much silver and gold for himself. So notice the list. Don't get a bunch of horses. Don't go to Egypt to get your horses. Don't get a bunch of wives. And don't get a bunch of silver and gold. There is a king in the Old Testament, in the Tanakh, who is literally noted for doing all of the things on that list. Who is it? Solomon, Shlomo, the, quote, wisest man who ever lived, for a little while. Okay? And then something happened. Now, there is a question as to whether or not he ever kept the commandment in Torah that all of the kings had to write out their own copy of the Torah. Some question whether he ever did that. But there's another idea. This is what I learned about, that Mark Biltz presented in an article in Christianity Today in 2019. That Solomon indeed, and this is in Jewish tradition, he's quoting some Jewish tradition, that Solomon indeed wrote out his own copy. But guess what he did? Changed the words. Just like we read that the religious leaders did. Solomon changed the words to, you shall multiply horses. You shall go to Egypt and get your horses, and on down the line. Now, whether or not that one is true or the other, it doesn't matter. He ended up disobeying God's commands, and the result, the kingdom was broken in half and ripped away from him. Yes?
At the height of Solomon's wisdom, what was the quotation deed that he did?
At the height of his wisdom? Well, you have that, the woman with the baby, the story of the women that brought the baby. Yeah, which is very wise, okay? Right at the beginning. Yep. What was that, Matthew?
Also Ecclesiastes.
Well, yeah, the book of Ecclesiastes, which may have been written by him. It was, if it wasn't written by him, it was, there was an editor who collected his writings and put them together in that book. But, yeah. Okay, so there is wisdom in that book, but there's a hopelessness in that book as well. Has anybody ever read that? Ecclesiastes? Don't give it to anybody who's down in the dumps and say, go read Ecclesiastes. Don't do that. Okay, because at the end of it, they'll be like, oh.
You know the ancient Chinese wisdom? I have a feeling it was from Solomon.
So there's an idea that the ancient Chinese wisdom may have been from Solomon. And here's another idea, that much of the ancient wisdom of the world may have been from the Hebrews as they traveled and got scattered all over the world. And there's a very interesting book that I haven't read yet. How do I know it's interesting? Because I thumbed through it. And it's sitting up there waiting on my stack of things, but other things keep getting shoved in there. All right? That's about the Chinese letters being related to the Hebrew letters. So, I haven't read it. When I do, I'll let you know. Okay? So, the idea now down in Kings, if you read in 1 Kings 10 and 11, you read about Solomon, the king. He made silver as common as stones in Jerusalem, and cedars as plentiful as sycamores in the foothills. His horses were brought from where? From Egypt, from Kiva. The king's merchants would buy them from Kiva at a price. And then down one more chapter later, King Solomon loved so many foreign women besides the daughter of Pharaoh, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, and Hittites, from the nations of whom Adonai said to the children of Israel, "You shall not associate with them, nor they with you, for they will turn your heart away after their gods." Solomon clung to them for love. So he had 700 wives as princesses and 300 concubines. And his women led his heart astray. No. How many? Never mind. Moving on. Moving on in Deuteronomy. See, a husband and wife are designed to work together. They have to be obedient together. If one is obedient and the other is not, it doesn't work well. Right? So it's a team effort. Okay, so this was the law that we read about. When he sits on the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself a copy of this Torah on a scroll. Okay, it will remain with him, and he will read it all the days of his life in order to learn to fear Adonai his God and keep all the words of this Torah and these statutes. Okay. Maybe we'll do that one year. Have you guys, we'll all write our own copy of Torah in Hebrew. Just kidding. I wouldn't do that to you. Okay. All right. Now, the next section here in the reading is about the Levites, and the Levites who have no inheritance with Israel. Okay. They are, God is their inheritance and he is theirs. Okay. They are the priests. The Kohen is the word, and the letters Kaf, Hey, and Nun mean come behold the Son. That's amazing that the name chosen for the priests in Israel was come behold the Son. Did they know that? I doubt it, but it didn't matter. Okay? We know that now, looking back on it. Okay, now you in the 18th chapter here, hold on a second, I got a little bit mixed up in my notes. Yep, the 18th chapter, about the priests, all right, that they have their own share from the offerings that were made. See, one of the offerings that were made that were olam offerings, burnt offerings, those were the ones that got all burned up, and the smell or the aroma or the smoke, which had the life of the animal in it, the life was in the blood. The blood was what was offered up. The life was offered up as a gift to Yehovah. Well, I thought it was all about the death of the animal. No, it's about the life of the animal. Because the life is in the blood. The offerings were not known as sacrifices, they were known as offerings. Something that was offered up. Okay? The death and the atonement is only one sacrifice. There were 5 main sacrifices. Only one of them was about atonement. And it really happened. Okay? In other words, if you sinned inadvertently, only inadvertently, and you went in and you offered this animal, okay, the blood of the animal provided atonement that was real. You were forgiven. You were atoned atoned. But in the book of Hebrews, you read that the blood of goats and lambs was never able to do something. What was it never able to do? What? Well, yeah, high-handed sins, meaning rebellious, intentional, but there was something else that the blood of goats and the bulls and all was not able to do. Cleanse your conscience. Okay? Who's able to do that? Yeshua. Okay? So, all right. Yes?
Could you say then that as the animals were sacrificed in the smoke and the aroma is going up and it's caused from the blood being burned,
Uh-huh.
that we are offering back blood and life to the Lord as he gave his son who offered his blood and life to us.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to repeat that. So, and my answer is yes. Okay? The idea is that when the blood burns up, and really it was the fat that burned up more than anything, but the fat's got blood in it, right? When it burned up and the smoke rose up, the idea was that it was an offering of life given to God as a thanksgiving for the offering of life that he gives us. Okay? So it was nothing like the ancient religions that their whole idea was, we got to give this whatever, goat, lamb, baby, whatever, we got to throw this into the volcano so that the gods won't be angry with us. No, that's not what it was in Israel. But unfortunately, that's the way a lot of people view the whole sacrifice system in the Tanakh. And that means they view it with jaundiced eyes that it was bad. So then that kind of undergirds this idea that the God of the Old Testament is bad, but the God of the New Testament is good. So we have the mean, angry God the Father, but then we have the nice, friendly Jesus the Son, who lays down his life so that God the Father is not angry at everybody else. He takes all of his anger out on Jesus and beats him to a pulp and kills him so that he won't be angry anymore. No. That's ancient paganism. That's not what's in the Bible. Okay? Okay, so moving on. Deuteronomy 18:9, when you enter the land Adonai your God is giving you, you are not to learn to do the abominations of those nations, which is exactly what they did. Okay? The 15th verse, Adonai your God will raise up for you a prophet like me. This is Moses speaking these words. Prophet like me from your midst, from your brothers. To him you must listen. Okay? Going on about that prophet, he says, I will raise up a prophet like you for them from among their brothers. I will put my words in his mouth, and he will speak to them all that I command him. Now, if you're a Jew, or you're not even a Jew yet, you're an Israelite, and you're hearing these words, either from Moses, because you're in that generation, or you're hearing them read, that these are the words of Moses with our ancestors, and these are the words. I will raise up for you a prophet like me. You are to listen to him, okay? And I will put my words in his mouth, and I will raise him up among your own brothers, okay? So what are you waiting for? You're waiting for the great prophet to arise in Israel. And look at Yeshua. Look at Jesus. In Matthew, he gives the Sermon on the Mount. Okay? Which is like, in a way, like when Moses was giving Deuteronomy, because all Yeshua is doing is quoting from Deuteronomy and then giving the how to do it. How to do it the right way and how to not do it like your religious leaders are teaching you to do it. In Matthew, there are 5 teaching discourses. 5. How many books of Torah are there? 5. Okay? So over and over again in Matthew wants to let his readers know that Yeshua is that guy. He is the prophet that was like Moses. Yeshua goes up on the mountain in transfiguration, which we'll learn maybe a little bit about this Friday. If not, then we'll learn it in about a month because we have the feasts and everything coming up. Do you remember what the words from heaven were when Yeshua was on the mountain? When he was at his baptism, there were words from heaven. This is my beloved Son in whom I am well pleased. On the mountain, there are words from heaven. Do you remember what they were? This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. That's what he said. That's what Moses said in Deuteronomy. So Yeshua is the second Moses. Now, he's a whole lot of other things as well. But that's one of his functions, was to be this guy. Okay? The spokesman. Yeshua said this, I do nothing by myself, but speak what the Father has given me, or has taught me. For I did not speak on my own, but the Father himself who sent me has commanded me what to say and speak. And I know that his commandment is life everlasting. Therefore, what I say just as the Father has told me. What does that sound like? A prophet. I'm giving you the words of God. Okay? And in his prayer in the 17th chapter of John, he said this, the words to his Father, the words which you gave me, I've given to them. They received them, and they truly understood that I came from you, and they believed that you sent me. John 17, one of the most amazing chapters in all the Bible. John 17. Okay, last on our list for tonight, well, almost last, is the idea of false prophets. Moses goes over that in Deuteronomy, the 18th chapter, that when a prophet speaks in Adonai's name and the word does not happen or come true, that is a word that Adonai has not spoken. The prophet spoke it presumptuously. Do not be afraid of him. In other words, don't listen to him. If there's a prophet and it's bogus, why are you listening? Okay? Mainly, why are you listening anyway? You have the main one, don't you? Don't we have the main prophet, Yeshua, right? He's the prophet with a big P. Okay? So listen to him, number one. And just be aware that there are maybe millions of people right now on earth running around saying, I'm a prophet, I'm a prophet, I'm a prophet. Maybe they are, maybe they're not. Okay? I don't think that I would run around saying that. You can give a word that is a word from God, that is a word of prophecy. That doesn't make you a prophet. That makes you a believer who's able to hear God and give a word. And by the way, if that's you, you don't need to walk up and go, I have a word from the Lord. Okay? Because you don't know. It might be. Or you might be wrong. Have you ever been wrong? Have you ever heard like something that you thought was a word from the Lord, but it wasn't? Okay? So just be aware. Use humility when doing things like that. Okay? So Moses warns about it. Yeshua warns about false prophets who are bad guys, coming to you in sheep's clothing, but are ravenous wolves, and you will recognize them by their fruit. And I wonder what that is. What is their fruit? It's their life. Are they righteous? Are they living the righteous way, or are they living something else? And you know what I mean by something else. Are they living like Solomon did? So, someone who is truly sent from God, according to Deuteronomy and Yeshua in Matthew and John the Apostle, number one, must follow, love, and worship only the one true God, Yehovah. Number two, they must follow only His word or Torah and obey Him by keeping His commandments. Number three, they must produce godly fruit, which is behavior that lines up with His word. And number four, they must acknowledge that Yeshua is the Messiah who came in the flesh. Okay? If they're doing all that, then listen. If they're not, then don't even listen. Don't even waste your mental space listening to them. Okay? And they're not to be considered a prophet. And by the way, if it was learned that you were a false prophet, what was the penalty? Okay? So, careful with that one. Okay, now he writes about these cities that I already brought up. If you unintentionally kill another human being, then this is really interesting. It's legal that the next of kin avenge the death of their loved one by killing you. So they're going to be after you. Yet, if you didn't mean to do it, you can go into a sanctuary city and the next of kin will not be able to go in and deal with you. Okay? It's a very interesting law. Why would it be there like that? Yes? How is that managed? They were only for those that were murderers, all right, who did not mean to murder the individual. They were unintended murders, okay? In our words, it would be manslaughter. That's it. Yes. Well, yeah, you could leave. You could do anything you want. But if you left, you weren't protected from the avenger, the blood avenger. Sure. You could live in that city as a normal human being, doing your normal work or whatever, but your family wasn't there. It was not easy. It was not easy to live in one of those cities. That's okay. Well, I don't know. I think the rule is, and if I'm wrong, somebody correct me, but I think the rule is the avenger's not allowed to do that. Okay? How would they know? Because if that person now gets murdered by this person, then there's going to be an investigation, and the Israel CSI are going to be out, and they're going to find out, okay, hey, wait a minute, this didn't go down right. You weren't allowed to do that, and you weren't allowed to do this. But this was not a everyday happening in Israel. This was like a rare event when it happened that way. But I think what's interesting is that Yehovah allows there to be the next of kin to be one who can execute vengeance, but then he allows that the one to whom the vengeance will be executed will be able to go over here to a sanctuary area. It's very interesting. Aaron. Yes. When there was a new priest, it was all ended. You were free. There was no more avenging allowed. It was all done with, done away with. Now, something else that I will throw into the mix to make it even more interesting. The blood avenger of the next of kin. The next of kin. Okay? The blood avenger's real desire was to avenge the evil. If it was unintentional, God moved that out of the way in order to protect the one, but the avenging on evil was there, which is why you have the blood avenger. Yeshua is also the blood avenger. But the evil one is the one whom he is after. Okay? He's of the kin of Israel. Okay? He's represented in the book of Ruth by Boaz. Okay? And Boaz is the, there's another word for the blood avengers. Anybody know what it is? Kinsman redeemer, the Gaal. So don't think of the blood avenger as a bad guy. The blood avenger is ultimately a good guy. So, yes.
I remember the story of King David seeing Abner die in his fool because he left his safety zone and got killed.
Yeah, Abner, right. Abner was blood avenged. Put it that way. Yep, that's right. Okay. Now, if you want to know, these are where these cities were in Israel, the sanctuary cities, and they were placed in a way that people could get there easily. Okay. And then in the book of Joshua, you read about them doing it. All right, and dividing the cities up. Okay. And then finally, the last idea in the reading, Deuteronomy 20, verse 4, for Adonai or Yehovah your God is the one who goes with you to fight for you against your enemies in order to save you. So that's a reminder. Because they're getting ready to go into the land. This generation, right here with Moses in Deuteronomy, this is like the last words they're going to hear from Moses, and then battle comes about. So, yes. Yes. Right. Ah, there you go. If he is acquitted, then he can come home. So the idea is, meanwhile, while you're not acquitted, you can go over there and the avenger can't get you. But once you are deemed not guilty, then it's let go, and the avenger lets you go. See, it's brilliant. God is smarter than I am. And smarter than we are. If we would only realize that, you know? Human beings, because however many years we've been around, have always had this idea that we're going to outsmart God. Right? And that's just not going to work. Okay, Matthew, I'm going to give you have the mic.
A couple of weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, you said that when we were talking about Jubilee, you said that they never followed up on that. Is there historical evidence that they followed up past the judges' era on the sanctuary cities?
I do not know. Matthew,
Okay.
A lot of your questions I don't know the answer to. I need you to go look that up and let me know, because I don't know. That's a good question, but I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Yep, that's a good one. Yep, during the Jubilee. Yes?
Another thing I found interesting in the Bible, it called City of Refuge.
Yes, City of Refuge. And who is our refuge? Yeah, Yehovah is our refuge, right? He is our refuge and our strength. So, good. One more thing I'll bring up. Did you have your hand up, Dana?
I have a question when you're ready.
Okay, go ahead. If it's going to be long, then I'll give you the mic.
Short? Well,
Short.
questions. One short,
Hit
one
it.
long.
Okay, hit the short one.
Short question is well, there's going to be 3 cities. Are there 6 cities because there were 2 separate places?
No, there are, how many did I list? 5 cities on the list.
Happened to the idea that there were going to be 3.
6 on the list. Okay, so that's 1 in Naphtali, 1 in Manasseh. Yeah, on 8, on page 8. They're listed and where they're to be.
Right, but Deuteronomy 19:2 says, set apart 3 cities.
Which one? Deuteronomy 19. Yeah, well, let's.
Page 7.
Well, let me look at that. Let's look it up. I have a Bible.
What's on your
I know, but
okay.
but I may have gotten some Deuteronomy 19:2. Okay, when the Lord your God cuts off the nation the land your God is giving you, and you dispossess them and dwell in their cities and their houses, you set apart 3 cities for yourselves in the land of the Lord. You shall measure the distances, provide 3 parts of the area of the land that the Lord your God gives you as a possession, so that any man's slayer can flee to them. And then in Joshua is where they divide it up, and they make these 6. So that's a really good... it's after they got into the land. Yep. But why would it, in Deuteronomy 19, it says when the Lord brings you into the land. Okay, so then Joshua 20, verse 9, is that where it is? Joshua 20, verse 9. These were the cities designated for all the people of Israel and for the stranger, that anyone who killed a person without intent could flee there, so that he might not die by the hand of the avenger of blood. So if you go up to verse 7, okay, if you're a refuge, flee, take him to the city, the avenger. So they set apart Kadesh, Shechem, Kiryat Arba, and beyond the Jordan, east of Jericho, they appointed Bezer in the... okay. So here's what I think happened. All right? In the initial view of the land was across the Jordan. But when the Manasseh and the one other tribe went in, they asked if they could have the land on the other side of the Jordan, so they went ahead and gave them their own sanctuary cities that were there. It's a good question, good detail. I'm going to give you the mic for the next one. Don't hold it real near. Just peel it out.
The thing that I was wanting, and I don't know if you want to answer this question tonight or fill it in, but all right, so the firstborn all died in Egypt on the Passover. Can you help me understand the relationship of the firstborn as it relates to Yeshua and as it relates to the Passover? Is there can you show me the relation of that? Can you help me with that?
Yes, maybe.
Maybe, okay.
So here's what I know. Okay, it's a good question. It's a very good question. Okay, that in Egypt, when the firstborn died, all right, there was a what word am I looking for? There was a symbolic value that was always on the firstborn. Okay? I've got to get this stopped. I'm sorry. Technical issues. Dealing with technical issues. I'm going to need you to give me a little while because my brain right now is kind of going, but you have the firstborn of Egypt that died, and then you have the Levites that are standing in as the firstborn, all right, of Israel, so that they don't die, in a way, okay? And to remember the firstborn in Egypt, okay? Yeshua is first fruits, and he's, in a way, firstborn of Yehovah, right? So, all of those are related. Exactly how, I don't know right now. Does anybody know? Can anybody bring it up? You're looking at me like you might know. Yeah. So did I, but it's leaving me. I should
Looks like you brought something like that up
Yeah.
when we were talking about Esau. And
Well, yeah, because Jacob and Esau, Esau hated his position as firstborn. He despised his birthright. So yes, it's all related. Right now, I don't know. I think it's because it's 8:30 and I've been teaching an hour and a half and it's shut down. My brain is just like tired. Go ahead. Yes? Can you give the mic back there? Go ahead.
And I might be off, but from what I'm remembering is the firstborn that died in Egypt. When they came out of Egypt, the Levites became substitute for those as a firstborn.
Yes. Hold it up a little bit closer. Yes.
The
Yes.
Levites became the substitute for
Yes.
the ones that had died as a firstborn.
Yes.
So,
That is right.
yeah,
And yet there is more.
yeah, there is.
Yeah.
But
So maybe next week I'll remember and be able to bring it up about what is the more. But it's a good question. Or you can go dig, do some background. I know. That's why you pay me. So, no, I was talking to Dana. Or you can dig. Yep. All right, guys. I'm going to sign off and let you know we'll be back on Friday night, live, right here at Wellspring, doing the Gospel of Matthew and Peter's words and moving into the direction of the Transfiguration. So bless all of you. Have a great week. Goodbye, lovely Zoom audience.